So friends, from this point we move on to the English essay in the hands of Bernard Shaw further, and there other aspects of the essay as well as the range of ideas that Bernard Shaw projects would also be dealt with. So over to Professor Payal Nagpal again to take us into that territory where the essay actually flowered in a different form in Bernard Shaw.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. So, we've already discussed the preface to Doctor's Dilemma, preface on the doctors, and there's a preface. He'd written prefaces to a lot of the plays, and here we have before we actually move on to the second part of this discussion about a preface to another very controversial play, which is Mrs. Warren's Profession. So before we move to that, one can see a kind of different shade in his writing of the preface. For instance, in the preface to Major Barbara. So here he looks at the whole field of criticism itself and says that before dealing with the deeper aspects of Major Barbara, he says, "Let me, for the credit of English literature, make a protest against an unpatriotic habit into which many of my critics have fallen." So here he goes into this long tirade against the critics, and he says that a lot of things are attributed to Shaw, but he says and he then goes on to show how he kind of derives his understanding of literature, what were the influences on him, be it Dickens or Lever's story and so on. So here he says that, his whenever my view, he says, strikes them as being at all outside the range of an ordinary suburban churchwarden, they conclude, he says, that I am echoing Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Ibsen, Strindberg, Tolstoy, or some other, writer who's from the northern or eastern Europe. So he says, why is this need there to connect Shaw's writing with writers abroad? And he says it's important to connect his writing, really speaking, with a tradition that is there in England itself. So he says that, to quote from the preface to Major Barbara. Now here, as you can say, that this has practically nothing to do with the play, but it has a lot to do with, the way in which he understands his own influences, the way the writers who shaped his sensibility, and he's also lashing out at the critics for constantly, connecting Shaw's writing, let's say, with the writers abroad. So he says, I confess there is something flattering in this. He says that, his accomplishment, he says, as a linguist and his erudition as a philosopher. But he says that he cannot tolerate the assumption that life in literature is so poor in these islands. He says, as if, there's hardly anything that's there, in their own country, that there is a need to go abroad for all dramatic material that is not common and all ideas that are not superficial. So he says, I therefore venture to put my critics in possession of certain facts concerning my contact with modern ideas. So he says that it's important to know from the writer, how he was able to shape his modern ideas, instead of constantly looking at, let's say, Ibsen or Nietzsche or any other writer to attribute the shaping of Shaw's sensibility, with writers abroad. So he also says that he wants to put the theatre critics to shame for treating Britain, what he calls, as an intellectual void. So he says theatre critics assess his plays as if all these ideas in Shaw's writing have been imported from other writers from different countries, and as if Britain was incapable of providing it. So he's also probably at this point sharing with the reader of the trend of criticism, especially in the context of theatre. And so, how every criticism of moral, religious, juridical institutions must be imported. So he urges what he says to the critics to remember that this treatment of Britain as an intellectual void is something that is rather unacceptable, and they need to look at they need to look within their own country to actually find out what's happening. So this kind of writing is very different, and as you can say that, there is practically no mention of Major Barbara, the play, and even when in the latter part of the essay, he goes on to explain this in great detail. In the first half of this preface, there is absolutely no mention of the play, which is quite big. It's only later that he talks about some of the characters, and there too, as I said, the characters are more like take-off points to discuss different aspects of society that he has his eyes set on. And with this, we would like to move to the next preface, which is to a play titled Mrs. Warren's Profession, and this play was banned because it was a play that spoke about prostitution. So it was a play that was banned, and the censors actually ensured that the play was not performed for many years in England. And the preface is very interesting. Again, it's thematic, and it does not really delve into the play, but it creates that framework around the play. And with this one being titled The Author's Apology. But before this, again, I'd request Professor Prakash to share his views on something like a preface to Major Barbara, where we can see that it is, if one were to remove the title and were to just take the first part of the essay, it would just it is the English essay, really speaking. It's not really
very true, because in this preface that you refer to, there is a total gap between the preface and the play, and it's a very controversial play as from the political point of view.
Yes.
It's about social change. It's also about the condemnation of the ruling classes, and there are neat divisions in the text. Between where is money, where is industry, where is the hypocrisy of culture, and where the actual people who live. So there are three layers of human experience, also of social regimentation in England at that time. And the way the acts are in the play, the scenes are in the play, the same way there is a structure also in the preface. So the preface has an independent structure, and it's about the essays. He's commenting on injustices, social divisions, hypocrisies in the preface, and the same are then in a different form presented in the text of the play itself. So I think that's a point that should take us nearer home, nearer the English essay, where whatever the context, the writer would say one thing or the other shortly and in a short, crisp manner, and in that manner lies the soul of the English essay, and he is making us socially aware as much as in the preface as in the text. And for him there is no division. The division is there only for us, for the publisher, but not for Bernard Shaw.
Not for sure.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you say this, because if one looks at the preface itself and his the first part where he is constantly talking about the need to locate it within Britain itself, then it also kind of draws attention to the fact that if England has, if Britain has inspired him to write what he has written, then the issues also arise from the same country. One need not think about it as something that's happening elsewhere. It's something that's happening, absolutely close at home. So if you look at, the preface to Mrs. Warren's Profession, as I said, it was a very controversial play, and there's one particular New York performance of 1905, I think, where, the performance was stopped because it went against some of the censorship laws at that point of time, and the play, of course, was banned for several years. So but he makes some very, very seminal points in the preface to Mrs. Warren's Profession, and he writes that so well have the rescuers learned that Mrs. Warren's defense of herself and indictment of society is the thing that most needs saying, that those who know me personally reproach me not for writing this play, but for wasting my energies on pleasant plays. So some of the plays were clubbed as pleasant plays, and Mrs. Warren's Profession and The Widow's House, these are plays that were clubbed as the unpleasant plays. So he says that there are people who have criticized him for writing the pleasant plays for the amusement of frivolous people, when I can build up such excellent state sermons on their own work. So, but one must say that whether it's his plays or the preface, neither are sermons in any way, and
Would it
he's
also
very,
reflect,
very rooted in social reality.
would it also reflect on the nature of the English essay that's meant for the pleasant purposes of entertaining the audience, but then in that message also lies hidden the unpleasant aspect of life?
So I think Shaw, at least of all the writers, he certainly does not use the essay to write anything at all that is pleasant. As we have just seen from the preface to Doctor's Dilemma, I mean, he's just going all out, absolutely no holds barred, and he's just telling them that, well, there's nothing too great about you. So, so certainly, he's using the essay to good use, and so this kind of prose writing, which precedes a play, and these are two very different genres in a sense. So the English essay forms a separate category, and the play itself is a separate category. I mean, we're looking at the genre of drama there. So but the two are connected in a way, and yet at the same time, this whole idea of building a kind of prose framework to the play is also at the level of looking at the different genres and their interactions is very, very interesting. Probably this kind of thing happens today in the maybe 1990s onwards has been happening in terms of different genres, where the solidity of each, if it's poetry, it can have prose, and prose can be poetic, and fiction can make use of different. So this kind of fluidity is interesting to watch and interesting to read. So Shaw probably in that sense is using two categories together in the same space, and that itself becomes a very interesting point of entry for us to see the way in which the essay impacts the play, and vice versa. So so he says that Mrs. Warren's profession is, he says, the one play of mine which, he says, I could submit to a censorship without doubt of the result. Only it must not be the censorship of the minor theatre critic, nor of an innocent court official. So he is very clear. He's actually this preface is also a defense of the play in a sense, because he says that in it he's not valorizing the profession per se, but he's talking about the way in which society supports this profession, has facilitated it, and the social evils that are there that are created by the society itself.
And then seeks to hide it.
And they seek to hide it.
Yes.
Absolutely. And he's very critical of this aspect. So,
so there will be a banning of this. Not that there is a recognition of this, and then you take it seriously, because it is unpleasant. Therefore, you don't want to show it to the people who created that unpleasant atmosphere.
Unpleasant atmosphere, and which is why he says that it is the one play of mine. He says that he could submit to a censorship, knowing that
they'll censor it.
He knows that it will pass, provided it is not a minor theatre critic, he says, or an innocent court official. So, or somebody who consciously profits by Mrs. Warren's profession or makes use of it, and so on. So, or makes of it a domestic virtue, he says. Then he says that then there are people who are smitten with a kind of sentimental affection, and would want to probably convert her into somebody, make her a victim figure. So, in the play, she's not a victim figure. She's a woman who's running what she calls a successful business, and it has saved her from dire poverty. It has kept her alive and has kept her prosperous. So, but people would probably be more comfortable in kind of, valorizing her as a victim figure. But nobody is willing to look at the profession for what it is in terms of its connections with the society, and seeing what is the kind of society that has created Mrs. Warren's profession. So he says, nor am I, he says he's also not prepared to accept the verdict of the medical gentleman, who would completely want to sanitize the whole thing. And so Mrs. Warren, he says, while leaving Mrs. Warren's patrons, her military patrons, free to destroy her health. So he says he's content to have his play judged what he says, by a joint committee of the Central Vigilance Society and the Salvation Army and the sterner moralists and so on. And he says that there is a comfort level in either looking at the woman as a victim figure, or there is comfort if this protagonist carries the blame. The fact that she refuses to accept the blame for it is something that disturbs. So he's also, in a sense, getting to the bottom of the reason why there is this huge discomfort with a play like Mrs. Warren's Profession, and why is it that critics themselves are uncomfortable with this. So he says that some journalists are shocked, and he says they will probably gather a very confused notion of what he says. They will consider this play to be full of some kind of scandalous immorality, and that he says they are, of course, they are mistaken in this, and such an audience will be revolted by some of the fashionable plays. So he says, if I do not draw the same conclusion, it is not because I am one of those who claim that art is exempt from moral obligations and deny that writing or performance of a play is a moral act to be treated on exactly the same footing as theft or murder. It produces equally mischievous consequences. But he says he is totally convinced that fine art is the subtlest, the most seductive, and the most effective instrument of moral propaganda, accepting only the example of personal conduct. So he says that he is actually using the preface to make a very profound point, which is about critiquing the use of literature, the use of performance to actually push a kind of moralist agenda, and to prevent, to uphold in a sense certain values of the society, but to prevent the viewers, the audience, from actually challenging the way in which the society is created, and what are the different social classes that are there. So he says that art becomes a way of actually soft peddling a certain kind of moral framework, and for the audience to absorb that. And his play and his preface does neither. It does not kind of project any kind of moral agenda. It picks up a social situation and presents it exactly the way it is. So again, here, if Professor Prakash would like to add something.
No, definitely. Bernard Shaw, being a very serious writer and engaging with issues which can be literally called burning issues. The issues where the society stands condemned so much that it has to shamefacedly defend itself against criticism that Bernard Shaw, for instance, will be launching against it. So, and at the center of your discussion definitely is the Victorian hypocrisy. This is the Queen Victoria's time, and the connected with it, and the play is must have been written, must have been composed at least in the mind of the writer in the previous century, in the last decade, and Victoria was alive at that time, and that people were shunning seeing their own selves in the mirror, and he's holding a kind of mirror up to society of that time, and that's why he's so angry, particularly in the preface that you referred to, Mrs. Warren's Profession. And the profession is all the time indulged in by the high and mighty in society, and yet they can't show their face in public with that kind of support. So Bernard Shaw is playing a game with himself, with the audience, through the essay, through the comments that don't connect one with the other, but they connect overall with the social atmosphere of the time.
Which is exactly the point that he makes when he talks about, first he says that, maybe personal conduct can be accepted, and then he says no, he's not going to make that exception also, because ultimately even personal conduct is used to uphold a certain kind of moral agenda. And he acknowledges in this preface the fact that the influence of theatre in England is very high, and so when people come to watch a play, it raises a question which is actually very pre-Brechtian in a sense. The whole idea that what is the purpose of watching a play? So is it to again create that kind of moral rubric on which the society is based, to further it, to absorb it, to perpetuate it, or to actually see the society and social evils for what they are? And in a sense, the society is laid bare in his plays. And in the preface, I wouldn't say that he's defending it, but he's in a sense explaining that he's certainly not apologetic about showing the society the way it is. So he says it's because the impact of theatre in England is very high, that when we talk about private conduct, religion, law, science, politics, morals, then they are becoming more and more theatrical, and theatre itself remains impervious to then common sense. So he says he fights the theatre, and this is a very important point. And again, as one can see, it has nothing to do with the plot per se that is going to follow in the play. So he says that he fights the theatre not with pamphlets, not with sermons, and not with any kind of treatise, but with plays. So plays that are so effective that he finds the dramatic method, he says, is important. And so he says that anything, a kind of play, which also reminds us in a sense of Ibsen and Shaw's own work there, that it was very, very practically revolutionary for theatre to depict society as it was back in the day, instead of putting up plays that made the audience feel comfortable. These plays, be it plays by Ibsen, be it plays by Shaw, they do not give that feel-good factor to the audience, that they go out of the theatre after watching a play feeling comfortable with their lives or the society that they are a part of. And so he says, I'm the last man in the world to deny that if the net effect of performing Mrs. Warren's profession were an increase in the number of persons, then the performance should be dealt with accordingly. But he says that his agenda here was certainly not that, but to show that how is it that this kind of profession has come into existence, and how has society itself, where to pitch the responsibility. So he says, by depending on coarse humors and physical fascination and so on, he's saying he's not doing all that, but he's talking about, the way in which the society itself is made. What is the politics of that society? So, and in fact, he says if the old rule against the exhibition of anything that is considered to be illicit was revived, then he says the only result would be that Antony and Cleopatra, Othello, Troilus and Cressida, Henry IV, Measure for Measure, he says all these plays would be swept away from the stage, and they would probably be banned. So here then he's also bringing in the idea of how flawed the censorship model is, and he's finally winds up by saying that nothing would please the sanctimonious British public more than to throw the whole guilt of this profession on Mrs. Warren herself, and the whole aim of the play is to throw that guilt on the British public itself.
Professor Payal Nagpal, because we are coming to the end of the series also, so I'd like your half-minute comment on Bernard Shaw as well as the series itself. Just 1 minute.
I think Bernard Shaw makes use of the form of the essay in his preface to the plays, and it is very, very straightforward, hard-hitting and honest writing, and it needs to be read in that light. So that's
and
all.
The series.
I think we've covered a very important, category. It's really speaking. One reads the essay to probably understand different genres, but what this series has done is it has consolidated the English essay as a genre in itself. And I think that is that's a big takeaway, I think, from this particular series.
Viewers, I believe that all of us have to agree with Professor Payal Nagpal, both on Bernard Shaw and the series. And with that, we come to the end of it. And from next month, we'll be taking up another series, and we'll then introduce it properly and take it further in the context of discussion. Thank you.